Welcome to Sunday Night Prime. I'm Father Andrew Apostoli, a member of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, and I'm happy to be your host for today's program. Our program today is entitled Mary's Meals, and it's going to be a wonderful program. You're going to hear a lot of wonderful work being done for many, many children in the world. Before we get into our program today, I'd like to just remind you that if you have any questions or comments, please send your emails to sundaynightprime@ewtn.com. Again, sundaynightprime@ewtn.com. I've been getting a lot of emails from various people with nice questions and suggestions for programs, and I will be working on those. So if you've been sending in something and wondering, be a little more patient, please, and I'll try to get to all of them as soon as I can. Well, tonight we got a wonderful program, as I mentioned, Mary's Meals. You know, let me preface our program before I introduce our very special guest tonight with a little story. One time I was talking with Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and she said to me, very spontaneously, just started speaking, she said, "Father Andrew, we are not going to know until we get to heaven all the good that's being done in the world because of the poor, the needy, those who might be homeless and without shelter, without maybe sick and suffering. All of these different things," she said. "We're only going to know in heaven how much good came from that." Because she said, you know, in heaven, we can't do anything for God because God in heaven is perfectly happy, doesn't need anything. So what did God do, she said? God became man. She said, now we can do something for him because he said, "I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink." Well, our special guest tonight is someone who has heard those words of Jesus in his heart and has been deeply moved to give food and drink to many, many young children throughout the whole world. It's my pleasure to have as our guest tonight Magnus MacFarlane-Barrow. Magnus, welcome to the program tonight.
Great to be here.
Magnus is the founder and chief executive of Mary's Meals. So, Magnus, it's such a pleasure to have you. I know somewhat about your work. I'm going to learn much more now tonight with the program. But you know, the first thing that always struck me when I heard your name, Magnus, I said, what kind of name? You know, I didn't know anything about your name, your background, but you told me before the show that there was a St. Magnus. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Magnus isn't a common name in Scotland either. There are a few Magnuses in the far north of Scotland, and St. Magnus was a Norwegian. He was a king, a lover of peace. The best known story about him is that he prayed during this very bloody battle in the north of Scotland, and he knelt down and prayed for peace, and that prayer was answered, and that's what he's known for. And there's a beautiful cathedral, St. Magnus Cathedral, in the islands, the Orkney Islands in the north of Scotland.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's so nice to know about St. Magnus. I imagine many of our viewers today just learned about a new saint, and it's always great to know about the saints.
Absolutely.
You know, they inspire us so much. Well, Magnus, tell us, you know, I'm sure that people would be wanting to know something about your background, maybe your family and so on.
Sure. I'm a father and a husband. First of all, married with 7 beautiful children. Blessed with an amazing wife who's back home looking after them right now. I'm a fish farmer, a salmon farmer originally. Grew up on the west coast of Scotland, very remote area, small village, and that's where I still live. Very happy there. I love that part of the world.
I think I had met you and your wife. You reminded me before we began the program that I had met you there in Scotland just shortly after you had gotten married.
Yeah, that's right. We have very fond memories of that. I remember taking you around Glasgow. We were living there at that time, showing you the sights. Yeah,
that's right. Very good. Well, now, Magnus, you certainly are involved in a wonderful, wonderful work called Mary's Meals. How did that all begin? I know it was related a lot with also your family, too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I suppose the story really began back when I was a teenager still. We grew up in a small hotel. It was like a shooting lodge where people would come for hunting and fishing and so on. And When we were teenagers, my brothers and sister and I, my mum and dad decided that God was asking them to turn our home, this hotel, into a retreat centre. And they came to that decision after we'd made a pilgrimage to Medjugorje. And they simply first of all, opened the doors and began inviting people who wanted to come and spend time with us in prayer to do that. And then it became a little bit more organised, and there would be led retreats at weekends by different priests and people who would come. And then the huge blessing that our bishop, the Bishop of Argyll and the Isles, allowed us permission to have the Blessed Sacrament in the house. And that's really when the retreat centre began. And that's continued all these years since. Many people come from all over to spend quiet time in retreat there. It's a beautiful place. And also over the years, a little community has grown up around it, both young people who come and spend 1 year at a time there, often young people who are discerning what God's calling them to in their lives, but also a group of families have gathered round about. We are supporting each other in raising our children in the faith there as well. So it's been a beautiful place to grow up.
Yeah. It's a wonderful grace. You know, I had, would like to mention to our viewers also that I had the chance of going to Craig Lodge at least once. And I remember spending some time there, and it was certainly the peace of God was there. It was a very inspiring place. There's certainly the surroundings, the mountains and the loch, right? The loch there, the lake there, beautiful. And I remember your father telling me a story about the Loch Ness monster. You know, he said he had seen something of a sighting of that, and it was really a fascinating story to listen to. But I know a lot of the young men and women in our friars community and our sisters community have spent time there at Craig Lodge, the retreats.
Yeah, that's been a great blessing for us, that link with your community, and seeing a number of young people go on and join your community has been a wonderful thing. So I always feel very at home when I come here and meet them all.
It's like a pre-novitiate to go through
That's
Craig
right,
Lodge,
a little bit like that, exactly.
And sort of coming out of the world and learning about prayer, living in community, being responsible, and in different ministries and different tasks of the spiritual life, and so it's just been a great place.
Absolutely, and we see that continue to grow in lots of different ways as the Spirit moves. There's lots of great youth work going on in Scotland now through that community too.
Well, how then, once Craig Lodge was going then as a place of prayer, retreat house, how did you get this other call, your personal call to Mary's Meals?
Well, I never really planned it, and if I'm absolutely honest, it really began over a pint of beer in my local pub with my brother. This was the early 90s. I was a salmon farmer. I was in my early 20s. And this night we'd both seen a bulletin on the news, on the television, that described the suffering of people in Bosnia at that time during the war there. And we just began saying to each other, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just do one small thing to help the people there? And we began sort of planning, why don't we do an appeal and ask people for food and clothing and so on. And about 3 weeks after that conversation over that pint of beer, we found ourselves driving this old Land Rover full of this aid out of Scotland across Europe and delivering this aid into a refugee camp there in Bosnia. And that was amazing, and I always say that was the first miracle of the story. It was the first time that my brother and I ever hatched a plan over a pint of beer that actually happened. So that was amazing enough.
Now, we're not encouraging people to go out necessarily to the pub, but one beer in moderation, all good things is the thing. But look at what an inspiration came.
Well, I came back from that, having delivered the aid, thinking that I'd done my good deed and that it would be back to work on the fish farm as normal. But God had a completely different plan, because by the time I got home, all these things we'd asked for, the food and the clothing, continued to pour into our family home. So I prayed about it at that point, and I decided to give up my job, and I sold the little house that I lived in, and somebody gave me a truck, and I just simply began driving that truck back and forth to Bosnia. Thinking that would come to an end. I really said to God, I'll carry on doing this as long as there's a need and as long as people keep giving, keep supporting the work. And in many ways, that's just been the story ever since. The needs never gone away, and the support of people has never stopped. So initially, it was very simple, just about driving that truck back and forth, and then people began inviting us to different places, sometimes priests that we knew, missionary priests, for example, in Liberia and places like that, began saying, could you come and help us during that war there? So the work began to develop in different ways. But all of that work in the early years was done in the name of Scottish International Relief. And Mary's Meals was only born 10 years after that first little effort in Bosnia. And that came about because there was a terrible famine in 2002 in Malawi, Southeast Africa. And we went there bringing very simple emergency feeding project into villages there where people were literally starving. And during the course of that work, a local priest took me to meet this family in his parish. And he explained before I went into their home that the father of the family had died some time previously, and now the mother was dying as well. She had AIDS. And when I went into their home, the mother, who was called Emma, she was lying on her bare mud floor, and she had her 6 children around her. And I began talking to her, and she said to me, you know, there's nothing left for me now except to pray that somebody will look after my children when I'm gone. And then I started talking to her oldest child sitting beside her. He was called Edward, and Edward was about 14 years of age. And maybe like you'd say to any young person you meet for the first time, I said to him something like, Edward, what are your hopes in life? What are your ambitions? And he said to me, I'd like to have enough food to eat, and I'd like to be able to go to school one day. And that was the extent of his ambition at 14 years of age. And that was, some other things happened that year too, but that was one of the main sparks that began Mary's Meals, because over and over again we'd encountered this, that the very poorest children very often don't go to school because they're too busy just trying to find food, too busy trying to put the next meal on their family table, and therefore they miss out on school. So that's what Mary's Meals is all about, trying to help those children.
That's really almost like a miraculous story. You know, God was speaking to you through that child, huh? That young person, huh? Yeah. And you realized how deep and widespread the need was, you know, to feed these young children. Yeah. So you began to respond to that. Yeah. What was the first things you started to do?
Well, first of all, we had a meeting in that community, in that village in Malawi, and we said to the people, look, we've got this idea that we would like to start providing meals in your local school to help the poorest children come to school, and to help those who already come to school learn, because they'll be able to eat every day. But we said to them, and I think this was key to why Mary's Meals has worked, we said, we'll only do this if you believe it's a good idea. We'll only do it if you want to take responsibility for this. And specifically, we invited them to volunteer their time to do the cooking and the serving of the food. And immediately the people at that meeting said, yes, we want this. This is what our children need. And they began organising themselves to do the daily cooking and serving of the food. And we felt very strongly with this new work of ours that it was Our Lady's work, and that's why we called it Mary's Meals, obviously. And we gave it to her, and we asked her to pray for us and to show us especially how she would have us do this work. And I'm sure that's why the work's grown the way it has.
Yes. Well, when Our Lady gets involved in something, when her hand is on it, it's going to be blessed. It will have its struggles, as she was she's the sorrowful mother as well as the Immaculate Mother of the Lord, and she endured that cross, and I'm sure that the struggles that go into a project like this are just enormous. I remember the story with Mother Cabrini, and she was trying to decide whether to build a hospital. I believe it was in Chicago, and she was hesitant, and so she had a dream, and a Blessed Mother came in the dream dressed as a nurse, and she was going from room to room taking care of the sick people. And Mother Cabrini said to Our Lady, said, Mary, why are you doing that? And she said, because because you're not doing it. So she got the message, build a hospital. And I believe she ended up with not only one hospital, I believe she ended up with 2 hospitals in Chicago.
Yeah.
So she took that message very clearly. So Our Lady was certainly behind that call, and that's a beautiful beginning of great work. Well, we're going to be taking a break very soon now, and we don't want you to go away, because you're going to hear some wonderful, wonderful things of a great work of mercy. I was hungry, you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sunday Night Prime. I'm Father Andrew Apostoli, and our very special guest tonight is Magnus MacFarlane-Barrow. Magnus, you've been telling us a wonderful story about your call to do the work of Mary's Meals. That's our title for the program tonight, Mary's Meals, and we're going to hear all about that now as Magnus really shares some fascinating things that the Lord has been leading him to do. So Magnus, you gave us the story of how you began and how you encountered those the poor children there in Malawi. And now, tell us a little bit, what does Mary's Meals do? People would like to know how you're reaching out to them.
Well, it's amazing. From that little start in Malawi, we began just providing daily meals in one school there. Because we saw that children weren't coming to school because they were hungry and because they were looking for food elsewhere. And as soon as we started to provide those meals every day in that school, we could see almost immediately it wasn't just a nice idea, it was something that was really going to work, because children who'd never been to school before started coming because they knew they would be fed. And children who used to come to school all day and be there all day hungry without any food began to benefit from that lunch every day, and they could begin to learn. So we could see really very quickly that this was going to work. And right from the beginning, I think that our approach has always been really to be working with a real genuine respect for the people in the communities that we're working in. It's not about us from the outside in the more wealthy countries doing all the giving and those locally just waiting passively for our aid. Mary's Meals is much more about a whole lot of us walking together with that same goal, to feed the hungry child. So none of this work of Mary's Meals would happen without the contribution of the local people who are giving up their time to cook and serve the food. So from the beginning, that was the model. And the other important part of it was that we wanted to, as much as possible, buy food locally, so that we would support the local farmer, support the local economy. So in Malawi, the dish that we provide is made of their maize and soya with added sugar and vitamins and minerals. Very nutritious, but very cheap meal, but great for a growing child.
Yeah.
So that was the model, but almost immediately after that one school where we began providing it, we could see it worked there. Almost immediately the neighbouring school came to us and said, can we have Mary's Meals as well, please? And we said yes, and so it went on and on and on. Just in Malawi today, we feed well over 500,000 children every day, which is over 20% of the children of that country receive Mary's Meals. So it's having this huge impact there. And then it's also grown into many other countries. So we're providing Mary's Meals in 16 countries today.
16, oh.
So other African countries like Kenya, Liberia, Southern Sudan, lots of different situations, children living in refugee camps, children living in terrible city slums, working in communities that are recovering from war, like in Liberia, but always just that same simple approach, one meal every day in a place of education. And beyond Africa now as well, we provide a lot of meals in Haiti, for example, in India. India's slightly different model. We're working there mainly with Dalit children, so-called lower caste children who are growing up in communities who for centuries have been denied the opportunity of education. All those children that we provide meals for there are working children, Most days they're working in the garbage, looking for things to recycle. And we say to them, look, if you would just come away from your work for 3 hours, we'll give you a meal and we'll introduce you to education. So we gather them wherever we can find a safe place. It might be on a railway platform or under a tree in the village, and they come away from their places of work, and we give them that meal and we introduce them to education for the first time.
That's wonderful, wonderful. And I'm sure, you know, they must be responding with like people who are starving and they finally see food, literally and symbolically too, for their education.
Well, absolutely, because I think first of all, like it would be for any of us, food's the most important thing, you know, and so that's that need that we want to meet and serve first of all. But by doing that in that context of education, we're also helping tackle those underlying causes of poverty, because over and over again we see that the key to lifting communities out of poverty is a basic education for all, and that's really what Mary's Meals is all about, linking those two things, food and education. And we see it works. As I say, lots of different cultures that we're working in, different environments, different challenges, but always just that very same, very, very simple approach.
And you said you're in 17, was it 17?
16
different countries.
Today, yeah. In total, well over 700,000 children every day that we're providing meals to. And that number just keeps growing, thank God.
You still get more requests than
every day. You know, every country that we're working in, we would have a waiting list of schools waiting for Mary's Meals, waiting for us to raise the funds so that we can bring Mary's Meals into those communities as well.
I see. Boy, that is a wonderful work. You know, Mother Teresa, in her great concern, of course, you know, for the poor, used to say that so many in society today have rejected the child. You know, abortion, of course, is certainly really a great, horrendous crime against children, and destroying these lives of the unborn, neglecting children who are neglected, and those who live in poverty, who, you know, need help from those who have been blessed. And isn't that the way Christ wants us to, you know, to live?
Absolutely. And you know, I think sometimes I hear a myth that the problem is that there are too many people in the world, and that's such nonsense. There's more food in the world than we would require to feed all of us amply, and yet children are starving today, and there's no good reason for that. I don't think there's any good excuse for any of God's children to go a day without a meal, without one good meal at least, and that's our vision for Mary's Meals, that every child in the world should be able to receive one good meal every day in their place of education. I know when we began this work and we would share that vision, people would look at us like we were mad to have an ambition that was so grand or so ambitious. But you know, I think the more we see this work unfold, the more we think it's much more insane that 18,000 children will have died of hunger-related causes today around the world.
18,000?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is.
In this world of plenty, there's no good reason for that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, God has been so good to so many. I like in our country, in America, in Europe too. You know, the blessings are so abundant, and we are really not in touch with a lot of this abject type of poverty.
Yeah.
You know, where it's a life and death struggle every day. You know, just to survive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, and I'm sure that you know, Mary's Meals is bringing a ray of hope where there may have been only darkness and no vision for the future. Huh?
Yes. One of many beautiful things we see with Mary's Meals is the way young people here in the US or in Europe respond to this need as well, and they're very often the people who are leading so many of our fundraising efforts and so on, because I think when you explain to a child here that there are children in the world who are going days without food, generally their reaction is one of outrage. How can that be? But I think unlike adults, they seem, in my experience, very often to translate that feeling of outrage into action much more quickly sometimes than those of us who prevaricate or complicate the issue or ask the questions. They're just getting out there and doing it. So we see these school kids all over the world who are doing these incredible things, to make the work of Mary's Meals grow, and it's beautiful to see that going on across the world. Children helping children in that way.
You've created a real network, haven't you, of workers to want to do the work of caring for the very poor and those who are poor, who are in need. Each one needs the other.
Yes.
The one who's starving needs someone to give them a piece of bread, something to eat, to keep them alive with a sense of dignity too, and that's so important. At the same time, the person who has really the need to give, to share, and that's such a great thing. That's why I like that little story I shared at the beginning of the program today about Mother Teresa saying, we're only going to know in heaven how much good came because of the poor, So we could do for them because we're doing for Christ, in that great act of love.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think it's absolutely a two-way thing. I think those of us who are privileged to be involved in this work all know our own lives are enriched, and we become more fully human by doing this work, don't we? We were made for good works, and when we try to do them, our lives get better, I think. And I think that's one of the reasons I feel so grateful that God's given me this opportunity to be involved in this kind of work. I can't think of anything that I would rather do with my life, And so often going around the world, I just feel very humbled when I meet people who do these incredible things, these incredible acts of generosity, so we can feed the children. And so often they'll, when I try to thank them, they'll thank me because they would say just that their lives have got better through getting involved in this kind of work, and that's very humbling. But there's a great truth in it as well, I think.
Yes, and it's such an important message to communicate to our viewers that if they haven't experienced the real joy and the real deep fulfillment that comes from giving, I really encourage them, to go out and try to share in some way. You maintain your work, I'm sure, in very many ways. What were some of those ways right now that maybe our viewers could find out how they also can be involved in your network?
I when I think about Mary's Meals around the world, I always just think of it as a series of lots and lots of little acts of love, lots of people giving what they have, and that takes so many forms. But because we don't pay armies of fundraisers or have a huge fundraising budget, so it grows because very often just through people telling other people, have you heard about Mary's Meals, and passing on the message. So that's one very simple way to help, just finding opportunities to raise awareness of this in people's own communities. Obviously, to provide the food every day, we need funds to buy the food. Sure. So this work depends on people making donations. Yeah. And there are many different ways to do that, through the website, through the post, and so on.
What is your website? This might be a good time to put that in there.
It's www.marysmealsusa.org. Okay. But if people just type in Mary's Meals on Google, they'll find Mary's Meals. Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah. And then people help in other ways. A lot of people gather together, maybe in a parish or a school, to connect with one particular school we're helping, say in Africa, and they would raise the funds required to build the kitchen, to start cooking the food, and then we'll put the name of the parish that raised the fund on the kitchen, and we'll send back photographs and reports, and we see that people love getting involved in that project, because again it makes that real connection between people when people get involved in that project as well. So the ways to help are endless, and I always also think of Mary's Meals as a fruit of prayer. I believe Mary's Meals grew or was born very unexpectedly because of of that prayer and that little retreat centre in Scotland for many years. I think it's a fruit of prayer, and it continues to be today. So I would just ask people to pray for the work of Mary's Meals, to pray that we always do it in a way that really honours our Blessed Mother and our Lord, and also that we find a way to reach more of those hungry children that are still waiting for Mary's Meals.
Yeah. So you've got not only, Magnus, you have not only Mary's Meals, but you have Mary's Children too, in a very special way. And there are the little children, the young children that you actually feed, but there are the other children of Our Lady who are doing good works. St. James says that faith without works is useless. He said, if you see somebody who's hungry, you got to feed them. You can't just say, go out and get a nice meal. You got to help them. Well, listen, we're going to take a break now. We'll be right back, so don't leave us. We've got plenty to say. Welcome back to Sunday Night Prime. I'm Father Andrew Apostoli, who's your host for today's program, and with me a wonderful guest tonight, Magnus MacFarlane-Barrow. Magnus, you've been telling us about the wonderful things that you're doing for the Lord, with his help, of course, or he's doing through you, however you want to look at it. But thank you so much for this wonderful work for Mary's Meals. That's our program tonight, Mary's Meals. Well, one of the things I always remember, a beautiful quote of Mother Teresa. We've been talking about how, people, different ways of supporting the work you do and wanting to be a part of it. It's just very attractive. Many people who just want to be generous and want to know how they can do this. So, but I always remember a quote. Mother said one time, she offered a prayer. I guess she had a pot of soup or something on the stove there. And she said to Jesus, if you promise me that you will not let this pot of soup go empty, I promise you that I will never allow it to be full, to remain full. In other words, I'm not going to keep it for myself. Whatever you give, I will give out. And I hope you keep giving it all the time so I can keep giving it in turn.
Beautiful.
You find that, you must see that in your own life.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful story. And that's certainly our experience. I don't think God is ever outdone in generosity. And all these years, we've never had a situation where we've had to stop feeding children in the school because we don't have the funds to do it. It does require a certain stepping out in faith, but we do that with great confidence in the Lord, that he will continue to move people to support this work. And over again, right from the very early days in Bosnia, when we began this, amazing things would happen just when we needed money, to the exact amounts. I remember this particular time when actually we did very nearly run out of money. This was in the days of driving trucks, and something happened and we needed this exact amount of money. I remember it was 4,200 and something pounds, I remember.
It's a lot of money.
It was a lot of money, and especially then, and we were a very, very small organisation then. And I came back from Bosnia knowing, I didn't know what was going to happen next if we didn't get this money. And there was a cheque literally for this amount of money that had arrived through the post. It was from an Irish priest whose name I won't mention, and he didn't know anything about our need, or that exact amount of money that we needed. And so I think God really just wanted to teach us something, or show us something very early on in this work, that he would never let us down, and he never has. And that's just continued in so many ways ever since. And every now and again, I think he just likes to remind us that he's looking after this work, that he's in charge. And because of that, we're always very reluctant to set targets or anything like that for this work. We never say we're going to feed X amount of children at such and such a time in the future, because it's his work, and he knows the speed he wants us to grow at, and we don't. So that's important for us.
That's right. Yeah, it's very true. Yes, it kind of reminds me in America, of course, when they have television programs, they take a break and they'll say, "We now a word from our sponsor." So the Lord is sponsoring all this. It reminds me in Turin, Italy. There is a kind of almost like a city within a city. It's called I believe it's called the House of Divine Providence, and it was founded by Saint Joseph Catalengo. And for Saint Joseph Catalengo, for one of the rules I believe he had for that was at night there could not be anything in the cupboard and no money. In fact, one time he found some money in a drawer, and he asked one of his fellow priests what that money was for. He said, well, in case we have any expenses. Well, he relied completely on divine providence. You know what? He threw it out the window. Now, the Salesians were in Turin also at the time, and some Salesians told me, but St. John Bosco went out and picked up the money. He used it for his kids. But anyway, St. Joseph Catalengo, he wanted to rely completely on divine providence. And I remember a friar telling me he had an opportunity to go to that House of Divine Providence. And he said that they take in some of the most difficult cases, sickness, mental as well as physical handicap, and so on. In fact, there was one building he told me they wouldn't allow him to go in there because some of the cases were so difficult that he would not be able to probably deal with it. So they took the poorest of the poor, as Mother Teresa would say. But one of the interesting other things he told me was, he said that sometimes, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, trucks would begin lining up, loaded with food, to bring into that House of Divine Providence. And he said, the people who worked there said, we don't know where half of these trucks come from.
Yeah.
So how many angels are on truck duty at night?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and also this work of Mary's Meals is obviously it's Our Lady's work, and maybe just share one beautiful story that happened with me in regard to that. Was it last year, the year before probably, with the terrible famine in Somalia? I was there for the first time. We began working with some great Muslim friends of ours in Malawi, because we couldn't get into Somalia without them, and we were working together to bring food from Malawi, flying it into Somalia. And I went there for the first time, and I was a little bit scared. Everyone was telling me, you shouldn't go there, it's very dangerous, and so on. And we were flying in this first load of food, and we wanted to make sure it was getting to the people that it was meant for. So I went there, and everyone else on the flight were all Muslim people who are part of this other organisation that we were working alongside. And we got there, and I was scared. There was people everywhere on the streets with machine guns and pickup trucks with anti-aircraft guns in the back of them, and it was a very volatile, unpredictable situation. So we went to this place to sleep the night, and when I woke up the next morning, I had this kind of sense of that I'd never felt so far away from home. All my Muslim friends were outside on their prayer mats saying their prayers, and I was left inside saying my rosary. And I realised it was Our Lady's birthday that day, and I just had this great sense that she wanted us to be there that particular day, and that what better gift could there be to her than to be feeding those children that were starving there that day. But also the other thing that came to me, and I think why I felt so far away from home in Somalia, was at that stage there was no church presence in Somalia. There was no possibility of going to Mass, and it really struck me in a very particular way that day, the horror of that situation, and how I so often take it for granted, the gift of the Eucharist and the sacraments, and to suddenly find yourself somewhere where there just wasn't that presence was a deeply disturbing thing, but it was a good thing too. So later that day, to be out in those huge refugee camps and seeing these bags with Mary's Meals written on them being handed out to these children, and to know we were doing that in Our Lady's name was a very very moving and special thing.
Wow, it's very, very good. It's almost like God allowed you to experience in a spiritual way the lack of the bread of life and Christ in the Eucharist, as these children were experiencing in a physical way the lack of the food they needed. Huh?
Yeah.
But your suffering was also for them as well. Huh?
Yeah.
You know, well, we hope
That's
someday that maybe we can share, you know, that many will see Christ. You know, they have a great love, don't they, of the veneration of the Blessed Mother, the Muslims. You know, Bishop Sheen used to say that he said you got to be, you got to realize that the Blessed Mother came down from heaven, and not by accident or coincidence. When she came down from heaven and appeared at Fatima, the only place in all of Portugal with a Muslim name, said it had to be for a reason. And he said it was because the Muslims have great respect for the Immaculate Conception.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
And even the Virgin Birth, isn't it interesting?
That's
Although
right.
Christ, they don't see Christ as Son of God, just prophet.
But I learned a lot of those things on that trip to Somalia. You know, in that situation with those very good Muslim people, and we were having these fascinating conversations about Our Lady and how they saw her role, and they were very, very interested in, you know, in our beliefs. So it was great.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah. She's the only woman mentioned in the Quran.
Yes,
I understand. She's the only woman mentioned.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Muhammad said that my daughter Fatima will be the second greatest person in heaven, woman in heaven after Mary.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
We pray for them, and someday, you know, that maybe that Christ's light will come to them. I know St. Francis, when he went to the Holy Land during the time of the Crusade, he tried to preach peace. And I think your very work of charity and love is a negotiation for peace, not in words, not in political, but in action. You know, this is the peace that we need to bring, the peace of God's children, you know, to share.
Yeah.
So, well, you know, I'm sure, Max, you probably have a few other little stories you'd like to maybe share with us, maybe a favorite one.
I suppose that's another wonderful part of this work, is having the opportunity to meet so many different kinds of people, and especially meeting children that receive Mary's meals, you know, and so many stories I could tell. I mean, recently we were working to make a beautiful film. Grassroots filmmakers who made a beautiful film, The Human Experience. I've made this wonderful film about Mary's meals called Child 31. So I spent a few weeks with them last year filming that, and mainly in Africa and India as well. And during the course of that, just met this amazing young girl. She was 12 years old. She was called Letty, and living in Malawi. And we went at first light one morning to this little hut that she was living in. And about 2 years ago, her mother had died, leaving her as an orphan. And she's got two younger brothers. I think they're 8 and 6 years old, younger, 8 and 4 years old. And it was just so moving that morning to be with Letty as she was getting her younger brothers ready for school, and to talk to this 12-year-old girl who was head of her household. And in some ways it was just that feeling of watching her, getting our little brother ready, bathing him, inspecting him, making sure he was dressed properly for school. It reminded me of our routine at home, getting the kids ready for the school run, but it was this 12-year-old girl living in that desperate poverty. And she just talked to us about what it's like to be hungry. She talked to us very openly about how it feels to go 2-3 days without any food, how it makes her feel sick. And then at the end of all that, she took her youngest brother, 4-year-old, on her back and carried him, and we followed her for about 1 mile through this slum. And she took him to this little nursery centre for under 6-year-old children, where we also provide meals. And it was only when she'd got her little brother there and left him there knowing he'd be safe there and that he would get food that day, did she walk back home to get ready for school herself. And on the way back she was telling us how that day she had big exams at school. It was a big day for her and she was nervous about her exams. But she'd done all that first, all that for her younger brothers. And it just reminded me again, you know, that sometimes there's a risk when you do this work that you can start thinking again that you're the one doing the giving, or those of us, you know, on this side doing the fundraising, we're doing the giving, and then you go and meet a child like that who's sacrificing so many things in her young life to look after her little brothers, you know, and to think she's doing that every day. And there are millions of children like that in Africa today who are head of their households at 11, 12 years old. So it's a tragedy, but it's also a blessing and an inspiration to meet these children sometimes as well.
Yes. Oh, yes. There's such a generosity among so many who, to us, you know, appear to have absolutely nothing. You know, kind of almost like the widow's mite when Jesus said she gave more than all the other people, but they gave it from their abundance. They had plenty more. She gave the 2 little pennies that she had. You know.
Yeah, I know. And then at the other end, you know, there's so many of those stories where we see that Mary's Meals is simply just keeping children alive every day, like that little girl Letty, who said that. She said, we wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for Mary's Meals, me and my brothers. But then at the other end, and more as the work goes on over the years, we have the chance to meet young people who are now leaving school and going on to a completely different life because they've been able to go to school. And there's this young man who I always remember, I met him a couple of years ago in Haiti, right in the worst of one of the slums in Port-au-Prince and Cité Soleil that had been very badly affected by the earthquake. And he lived in a tin shack there with his family. And I met him this day in a school run by an amazing American priest there, Father Tom Hagen. And we provide meals in his school. And I met this young man called Jimmy. He sounds like he's from Scotland, not from Haiti, but he's called Jimmy. And this day I met him, he was so happy, he was so full of joy because he had just received news that he'd been given a place in college. Jimmy was 18 years old by this time. He was very, very intelligent boy, spoke perfect English, played the guitar, he was the head boy of his school. But he just talked with such passion about how he wanted to go to college and he was going to study agriculture and how his ambition in life was to help the people of Haiti grow more of their own food so that they would no longer be dependent on aid. And he was just such a fine example of what we hope happens with Mary's Meals because ultimately it's not us from outside who are going to solve the problems of Haiti or Malawi. It's young people like those when they have the benefit of an education. So he was another inspiration to meet him.
Yeah, I think it's when you can give them that sense of confidence that we can't do everything, but we can do something. Yeah. Let's do whatever we can. You remember when they used to ask Mother Teresa, what are you doing? What do you call your work? And everything. She said, I'm doing something beautiful for God. Yeah. She knew she wasn't feeding every single poor person in the world, but she was giving an example, and she was feeding those whom God brought to her, you know, or she went out and found, like you are finding them out there too. And so it's a really such a great work. And you know, earlier in the program you had said, Magnus, that people are saying, well, there are too many people. No, there's not too many people. Someone once told me, you could put every single man, woman, and child in the whole world, not just our country, in the United States or something, the whole world. You could give them 1 acre of land in Texas. Every single man, woman, and child, and it would be enough. You know, each person could have an acre of land in Texas. That's how big it is. I mean, it's using the resources not selfishly, not to control money or make money, but to really share what we have. And you know, someday we have to give that account. And you know, your work reminds you know now with our beautiful Pope Francis. He has such a concern, you know, for the poor. We see that, huh? He's in touch with the little guy. So,
absolutely. He's a blessing for all of us, isn't he? He's a source of great joy and a great encouragement for us to get out there, as you say, to get out there and be amongst the poor, where we're meant to be as God's people. And reminding us also that we're all poor too.
That's right. We are. And you know, he took St. Francis, because St. Francis worked with the lepers. That was his first work there, you know, and he began to work to renew the church, you know. But Francis, remember the crucifix there at San Damiano, spoke to St. Francis, Francis, go and rebuild my church, which as you see is falling into ruin. And he didn't begin it, you know, he didn't go around trying to change everybody else. He changed himself, he lived the gospel. And that's how he became that example. See, you know, was it Chesterton who said the the gospel has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found wanting. It's never been really tried. And what you're doing is a marvelous work, Magnus, to inspire us that we can, do something beautiful for God in our own way. There are many works of mercy, and it's so important to know how we can serve God. You know, that little beer you shared in the pub with was it your brother? Well, God used that little moment of sharing to give an inspiration that has borne tremendous fruit for the world, for the church. And I hope a lot of people who are listening today, watching our program, will be inspired to do whatever they can. No one person changes the whole world except Christ and His Blessed Mother. He uses her. But we have to do whatever we can do, and be faithful. Is there any final message you want to give? We're down to about our last minute and a half here.
No, I just think, like you said, that because I think we can all do something, and I'm not qualified to do this work. I've got no academic qualifications at all, and I never plan to do anything like this. I just try to do one small thing, and I think we all know those opportunities to help people are around all of us every day. I think Mother Teresa also said that we don't all need to go to faraway lands to help people. We can do it in our own homes, in our own communities.
Remind me somewhat of St. Peter. Remember, he was a fisherman, and Jesus told him, from now on you'll be catching men. So you're feeding the poor of God's children. We're going to end with I'm going to say the prayer today before I give the blessing. This is the prayer for Mary's meals, and Magnus had both written this prayer. Our Father, give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us for the times when we take more than our share of the bread that belongs to all. Let us help you fill the starving with the good things, not with scraps from our table. Teach us how to share what is not ours to keep. Clothe us with your love that we may complete each good work you created us to do. Place in our hearts your compassion for each starving child, and use our little acts of love so that they starve no more. And I bless all of you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God's peace be with you all. Well, we come to that part of the program now where we make our little appeal. We've been hearing Magnus, the wonderful work that he is doing. And so he is feeding so many little children, both in their, physically, and their physical need of food, and also their education and so on, and the good example of Christ's love. And of course, Mother Angelica, she was inspired to do the work of promoting the gospel and the new evangelization. So I encourage all of you to please help support Mother Angelica and EWTN by sending a little donation. If you want to keep hearing these programs, we want you to be able to support Mother. So as Mother always said, put your donation for EWTN, put it between your electric bill and your payment for your telephone bill. Thank you so much, and God love you.